Today on Outside the Box Reviews, we're taking a look at the Mezco 112 Collective Universal Monsters Frankenstein. And this is starting a review off in a way that I didn't expect to be starting a review off in quite a while. A Mezco horror figure. It's been a little while. I was a huge fan of the Cinema of Fear line when they were doing that years and years ago, but then NECA kind of took over most of those licenses, and anything Mezco did horror related was more cutesy or super stylized. When Mezco started revealing these 112 figures, which are 6-inch tall action figures, done kind of in the similar style to NECA's Retro Collection or a half-sized 6th scale figure from Hot Toys with real clothes with a plastic body and sculpt, I was a little conflicted because I'm not a huge fan of those NECA figures, but these have something a little different going for them. They, in my mind, are a little closer to being that sideshow Hot Toys feel rather than the kind of softer sculpt that NECA's been putting out. And when they hit Universal Monsters, which is a property that I am always excited to get figures from just because it kind of gets neglected at times, I knew I eventually had to pick this guy up. This is the Previews exclusive version, which is green, or in color, I guess you could say, as opposed to the standard release, which is a black and gray coloration. I was kind of conflicted over which one I wanted, but I decided to go with the color version just because it personally looked cooler to me. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this guy. The monster comes with a pretty nice display base. It's quite a large, just circular base. It's actually bigger than like a sideshow base, which is kind of ridiculous given the size of the figure. Here we have the kind of electrical Tesla coil kind of things going on here. It's actually almost like an enamel raised up paint. You could feel the texture of all this white paint on here. And then we have the electricity going across the top. We do have, well, a scratch on mine, which is a little annoying. But we also have a peg right here on this one end. If we flip it around, we can see it sticks out the bottom here. And that could be pushed out. And to be honest, I kind of have to use the stand to push it out through the opposite side. And then we could peg in a posable arm similar to like a Tamashii stage or something of that effect. We could of course swivel here at the base where it pegs into the stand. We could hinge forward and back at the bottom there. And we could hinge up and down here in the middle. We can rotate this upper section side to side, and then we can open up these claws. So this clip will hold a figure. You can kind of position him around the base a little bit with it. With Frankenstein's monster, I don't find it being a necessary accessory just because he doesn't really do any crazy acrobatics. For like the Marvel characters, I could definitely see this being something you'll want to use to pose them in cool dynamic poses. But with Frankenstein's monster, I'm perfectly happy using the peg that goes into his foot. The figure also comes with a special 112 Collective Ziploc bag to hold your accessories, which is nice. Reminds me, I think Figma does this as well. So it's a good place to throw your extra stuff, I guess. I'm probably going to put mine back in the box just because I think that's going to be safer. And with these higher end figures, I do keep the box. And it's actually a very nice box, but we're not talking about that. This is Outside the Box Reviews. The only other true accessory we get with this figure is his manacle, which is pretty cool looking. It has that very cool old-timey design. It's mostly black plastic, but it looks like there might be a little bit of gray on there to give it some texture. We can see here there's kind of a clip with a peg, and those go together to create a locking ring that can go around his wrist. And we have a real metal chain going through the middle here. They're coming to a corresponding handcuff on the other side. That will go right around his wrist. It is a little loose, which is good and bad. It's not going to scuff the paint, I don't think, just because it's loose and not gripping tight on the paint there. But it also kind of free floats there on his arm, which I guess could cause rub if you're not careful. I'm probably not going to display him with the handcuff. It's a cool accessory, but I kind of like this figure more without it. As I already kind of mentioned, the one place this excels above the NECA retro style figures is the sculpt and paint, and I absolutely love both on this figure. They definitely got very, very close to Karloff. I'm not entirely convinced it's perfectly Karloff's likeness, but it's really, really close. Closer than I've seen any mass-produced company get. They really captured the heavy eyelids on there, the sunken-in eyes. There's a lot of great black paint around the eyes themselves. The green flesh tone has almost a weird translucence to it. It's not translucent plastic, but it gives it a really great look of being actually skin, which is fantastic. His face looks great, very lined and wrinkled and dark black in different places to give it depth. We have the sunken-in inside of his face, which is something I don't see a lot of figures capture, even though it's very iconic to the character. You can see the neck even has wrinkles in it. We have the 2 electrodes sticking out of his neck there. A scar going down the side of his jawline. The 1 clip visible at the top of his hairline, and the other scar there on the top of his forehead. The scar is probably one of the few places I feel it's lacking. It's just kind of a bright red in color, so it doesn't really have that dark, creepy look that the rest of the figure's face does. But an absolutely phenomenal sculpt here. The hair is decent. It's just pretty much black. There's no real shading in it, but it kind of fits the character. The sculpt's decent enough. It looks nice and stringy. You of course have the classic flat top up here on top of his head. And overall, just a really cool head sculpt. But it's not the only one we get. We can actually pop this head off, and I will note that the peg on the neck joint is a little scrawny. I'm kind of nervous that it may not hold up to repeated head swaps too well, but so far it's been okay. Then we take our other head and we pop it on, and it will actually feel like it's on when you just slide it over the ball joint, but you actually have to give it a little extra pressure, and you won't really even feel it pop in. But a little extra pressure is needed to get it to really pop on that joint and not just kind of flop around. And here we have our growling Karloff face, and this looks really good. I love the detail on the teeth with the black in between the white teeth. The sculpt on the face is once again great. I love the wrinkles they added in there, the kind of glare they gave the eyes. Just overall fantastic. It has all the rest of the same great paint and sculpt detail that the other head has, and just a nice extra expression to him. Though from this angle he looks a little more Herman Munster than he does Frankenstein's monster. Going down the rest of the figure, it's Frankenstein's monster. It's a little boring. We have kind of a black just undershirt here. The body underneath is obviously like a muscular sculpt. I'm guessing they probably use this for quite a few different figures, but it's a simple just fabric shirt. And then we have this overshirt here. Not a lot of detail here as well. We do get the pockets on there. No actual pocket, just the kind of flap there. We do get some button holes, but no actual buttons on it. There's not any real weathering to it either, and I don't believe there really was any in the movie, but it's just kind of a simple black overshirt. And then it cuts off here about midway down his forearms, and we get some really nice looking hands. We get 2 kind of open, relaxed, posed hands. They carry on the same great paint scheme as the head with the very dark fingernails. We get some awesome veins going through there, and you can see the scar or the cut there on his wrist. That continues on to the underside, and some great detailing there on the palm of his hand. And the opposite hand, same similar detail there. We get that bar that bridges his forearm to his actual hand, and I just love the detail in these lower forearms. Now these will also pop out. What I think is easiest is to kind of roll the sleeves up a bit, and then we can unpeg them. And I would be very careful, but the peg does seem to be large enough that it's not going to be super fragile. It's a pretty substantial peg. So we can take the other arm and pop that in. And there is kind of a sculpt here where you kind of can line up the shape of the arm to the shape of the rest of the arm, but the sleeve really covers that, so you don't have to be too concerned, and it kind of becomes an articulation point. My biggest concern, honestly, in swapping these arms is that you're putting pressure on the elbow joint, and that's actually where I'm more afraid of breaking the figure than the pegs for the lower arms themselves. But these 2 extra hands kind of have a gripping or just angry pose to them. They work well for him throwing his hands over his eyes when Fritz comes at him with the fire, or you could just be reaching maliciously to grab something. And they work well with either head, which is nice. Sometimes we get these heads on figures that it feels like you get one set of hands that goes with a specific head, but here they work really well with either. Once again, same great detail on them, and I just absolutely love the sculpt on this thing. Not too much from the waist down. Very basic pants on here. We don't even have pockets or anything. No belt sculpt on. I don't remember if he wore a belt in the film or not, but there's not one there. And then we come down to the boots, which are a nice shiny black. I also didn't realize his boots were that large, but they almost come up to his knee, which is kind of crazy. But they're very nice and shiny. We kind of have like a seam down here at the bottom where I guess they would have attached the platform heel to it. They're really nice looking. They have a nice kind of shiny, leathery look to them. And some great wrinkle detail there at the ankle. For articulation, we get quite a bit. The neck is on a ball joint, so we can look decently far down. We can look up a little bit, but it's pretty hindered. We can go side to side, and we can pivot really well. The arms are on pin socket joints, I believe. They'll go forward, back, as well as out to the side. They are hindered by the coat, and because it is kind of shortened because of how the monster is, is, you do really limit your forward and back motion because of the coat, and you have to readjust it. The elbow is a single joint, which bends about 90 degrees, and we can also rotate at that elbow. As I mentioned before, the connector pin for the wrists will let you swivel, and really with the sleeves down, you can't see that point, so you don't have to worry about lining up the sculpt. There's no actual wrist articulation just because of the way the detailing goes on the monster's wrists. It's pretty common with any Frankenstein's monster figure that we get that hindrance. We have a mid-torso joint, ball joint, so you can go forward, back, as well as side to side and pivot. And we have a waist joint, does very similar, forward, back, side to side and pivot, a little less so than the chest joint. Legs will go forward, back, out to the side, and we can rotate at the upper leg. The knee feels like a nice double jointed knee, so you get a great range of motion there. And my biggest disappointment with articulation on this figure is the boot. Similar to the hands, the only rotation point is at the top of the boot. You can't actually hinge the feet forward and back or pivot them or anything like that. That's a bit of a bummer. Of course, we do have peg holes at the bottom of the feet since he does use that with the stand that he comes with. And for a size comparison, here's the Mezco 112 figure next to the Universal Select Frankenstein's monster from Son of Frankenstein. This was the only one I had handy at the moment. The original Frankenstein release from the original movie was a shorter figure by far, but this is my best comparison I could grab quickly. And then on the other side is the NECA T1000, which surprisingly is about the same size. So this thing might actually fit in with some of your NECA stuff, which is pretty cool. I think if the motorcycle cop was actually standing fully upright, because this figure kind of has permanently bent knees, he would be a little bit taller than the monster, but still, not too bad. You could probably deal with that in a display and make them look like they belong together. This thing is a fantastic figure. I definitely highly recommend it. And it looks like it's the first of several horror figures in this style from Mezco. At Toy Fair recently, they revealed Ash from Evil Dead 2 and a couple zombies from Dawn of the Dead. So hopefully these do well. We almost get this weird cinema fear revival with all these new crazy horror figures. And if they all have the same quality that this thing does, I'm going to be very impressed. To me, I think Ash will be the real test, because that is a character that I'm going to want to put in very dynamic poses. His clothing is a little more intricate and needs to sit in a little more specific way than the Frankenstein's monster does. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they could do with something just a little more complex than this. But the sculpted bits are blowing me away. They are super high quality. It's really the clothing that gives me the littlest bit of doubt with it. And I'm curious to see what it's like going forward. Of course, I could look at the Marvel and DC stuff they're doing, but I've kind of sworn off collecting that stuff for now, so I'm just going to wait for more horror, because that's more my thing. Make sure you follow me on Instagram using your Outside the Box Reviews. Also check me out on Facebook, link below. Like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, this has been your Outside the Box Reviews. Stay tuned for more to come.